Hi folks, and welcome back to Contract Law. This week we are looking at contents of a contract and exclusions. And if you've already had a little look at the text, you'll see it's a little bit of lengthy reading this week. However, the good news is that it's fairly friendly stuff. It's not really rocket science. You have the usual grab bag of principles to get your head around, and the usual exceptions and twists and turns and caveats, but it's generally speaking a fairly friendly little area of law. So without further ado, let's go into our prezi. Here we are at contents of a contract and exclusions. And I kind of think of this topic as the contract law hokey pokey. Because we get to look at what's in, what's out, and what it's all about. You know, you kind of put your right arm in and your right arm out, your right arm in, and you shake it all about. You put your right arm in, you take your right arm out. So the first thing to look at logically is whereabouts do we find the terms that will govern the bargain between the parties. There are a number of different places. Obviously, the written terms would be a good place to start, but there are other things that you need to think about. Mere representations, things that get said. Collateral contracts. These are not actual contractual terms, but stuff that kind of works alongside the terms. You've got terms that get incorporated through a number of different means, and you've got implied terms. Now, when you read the text, they might just seem like this disparate grab bag of things. But what I like to do, as you know, is try and show you how everything fits together. Don't get freaked out by the next slide. I'm hoping it will help you work out the framework of where we're going to go in this series of videos. There it is, the messiness of my mind. What I want you to look at first is the picture. You'll see the contract down the bottom, the written terms with the pen's just been signed, all good, everyone's happy. And that symbolises the actual written document, forming the most basic and first spot you'll look for finding contract terms. But then around it, you've got all these people and you've got hands being shaken over the top of it. You've got a whole lot of other stuff that's going on. So, like I said, start with the written terms. That's probably where you're going to find most of your contractual terms. But then you've got all of this other blah, 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 human elements that go on, things that are said, conduct, prior agreements, all sorts of stuff happening. How do you work out what falls in as a contractual term and what of that stuff falls out of being a contractual term? Well, the first place we start is the parole evidence rule, because that is certainly what helps us sort the sheep from the goats when you are trying to find contractual terms. So as I said, the first and most basic place to start with is the contract terms themselves, the written terms. But if you have other things, they will probably be thrown out by the parole evidence rule. And mere representations are, for our purposes, not so important for this particular series of videos. However, just because a mere representation hasn't made its way into the contract as a term doesn't mean that there's nothing that you can do about it if the representation was something naughty that was said or done pre-contractually. Now, if that's the case, there are these little things called vitiating factors. Now, just bookmark that notion, but there are a number of different factors that the law has developed principles around that may help you to get some remedies if, in fact, a naughty representation was made pre-contractually. So it's not a term of the contract, but there's still remedies that you can get if something went wrong. Okay, just bookmark that for the time being. Now, when you're talking about terms, we first said go to your written terms. They're going to be, you know, probably definitive. But of those human elements that are floating around the edges of the written terms, there are a number of other places where you can typically look to find extra terms that might be in the bargain somewhere, so to speak. And apart from the written terms, you will have terms that are collateral. So if you've got collateral contracts, you've got the main contract ticking along quite nicely, and you may also have another contract floating alongside it that can be enforced and is justiciable, just like the main contract is. Or you may find that the main contract's ticking along, but terms have been incorporated that augment or somehow change the terms of the main contract. There are a number of different ways that terms can be incorporated as contractual terms. You might have terms that get swept into a contract by putting them in writing on notice, for example, or a sign. You might have terms that get swept in because they are printed on a little document you receive, like a receipt or a ticket or a voucher. These are the typical kinds of ways that terms can get incorporated as augmenting a main contract. And then you may have terms that wind up being justiciable because, here's your main contract, there's a whole heap of implied terms that sit underneath. They're not written anywhere, they're just implied in. Now, there are a number of different ways that terms might be implied, and that's probably where we will round out our discussion for this particular series of videos. So hopefully that has helped you understand where we are going with it all. We start with the written terms, and there's on your left hand side, but on the right hand side there's all of this craziness that goes on, all of the human elements. We do have rules that work out what of those human elements stay in as contract terms and what of the human elements fall outside that as mere representations, okay, and that leads to vitiating factors. So I hope I haven't confused you too much, and we will start out on our journey now in terms of looking at the contents of a contract. So I think we'll leave it there for this short introductory video. Perhaps you might need to have a short lie down or get some ice for your head after that last slide. But I hope it's given you a bit of a picture as to where we're going to go in this series of videos. We will start with the parole evidence rule that works out what happens in terms of your written contract, if there is a written contract, how you then sort everything else out that might fall inside or outside that written contract. So we're doing the hokey pokey. It's in or it's out. Couldn't resist that one. Okay, I'll see you again soon. Bye, guys.